The Separatist leadership was a vital part in Palpatine's plot to forge his empire, and when he no longer had use for them, he had his apprentice Darth Vader assassinate them on Mustafar. But what if the Separatist Council wasn't killed? How would this affect the years to come?
The war is over! Lord Sidious promised us peace. We only want...
Now, for this rethink, we'll go on the idea that following Order 66 and the destruction of the Jedi Order, as well as the forming of the Empire, the Separatists learn that Palpatine is going to have them assassinated. Now, needless to say, they would retreat, most probably to their holdouts in the Outer Rim. These holdouts are A, far away from Republic space in the core worlds and are therefore fairly distant from the bulk of the Republic Navy and Army, and B, they're not only well hidden but well fortified and would likely contain facilities such as droid factories or even shipyards, making these fortresses incredibly difficult to take. You may be thinking that the Separatist survival really doesn't change much. After all, the Clone Wars was all but lost by the time the Empire was formed, and that's true. The Separatists were in no position to launch any major offensives or defenses, but I believe that they would instead choose a scorched earth campaign to fight the Empire and cover their escape to the Outer Rim. Now, a scorched earth tactic is used during the withdrawal from an area. It's where you destroy all the resources and assets that the enemy could use. For example, when Wat Tambor was going to have Ryloth's capital bombed after the Separatist defeat. It's essentially the philosophy of if I can't have it, no one can. So, the remnants of the droid army would likely be ordered to destroy shipyards, cities, mines, basically anything that the Empire could use.
It appears a surrender is unnecessary. We will all perish for the glory of the Separatist alliance.
This would definitely hinder the Empire's advance through the galaxy, and would definitely buy the Separatists more time, but it's only delaying the inevitable. They can't win the war. Sooner or later, the Empire is going to destroy their holdouts and them in them. However, they have something far more important than droids and wealth. Palpatine needed to kill the Separatists for many reasons, perhaps the most important being that by the end of the war, the Separatist leadership could see that Palpatine and Sidious were one in the same, and well, essentially the whole thing was just a power play. The Jedi of course knew this as well, but they don't have the resources that the Separatists have, and I believe that by the end of the war, the Separatists would make sure that everyone knew that Palpatine was orchestrating the entire war in an attempt to gain power. Now, if this got out, it would be very bad for Palpatine, as he doesn't have the resources to control the galaxy through his military alone. It takes him many years to do this in the series. For this reason, he needed the support of the Senate until he could grow his military so he could rule without any dispute. However, when the people learned that it was nothing more than a power play, there would be uproar. There'd likely be a succession movement far larger than that of the Separatist crisis, with systems attempting to leave the Empire, which of course Palpatine would not allow. He'd be forced to use his military to keep the systems in line, which would lead to the Imperial military being spread incredibly thinly across the galaxy. Essentially, it would be the Galactic Civil War, but on a far larger scale, with the entire systems fighting the Empire, as opposed to bands of smaller groups, meaning as a whole it would be far more devastating. With many systems in rebellion against the Empire and how it deceived them, Palpatine would likely be forced to disband the Senate. This would only worsen the relationship between the Empire and the rest of the galaxy, and of course it's going to have some pretty big knock-on effects. Firstly, the Empire would be far less advanced. Palpatine would have to use majority of his resources on simply quelling uprisings and rebellions, likely choosing to keep clones as the bulk of his military as opposed to phasing them out. As well as this, military developments would not be viable. Massive projects such as the Death Star would be put at the back of the queue, as Imperial resources would be sunk into sustaining itself as more and more worlds chose to rise up. As well as this, initiatives such as the Jedi Purge would be nowhere near as effective. The Imperials would be so busy fighting their own people that they wouldn't have time to hunt the Jedis effectively, with resources that would go to the likes of the Inquisitors instead being used on clones and ships to fight the rebel systems. This could lead to the Jedi being able to regroup and counterattack the Empire, which would be pretty devastating. I mean, a fair few Jedi did escape, and they could almost definitely kill Vader, and they would likely ally themselves with the rebel systems. Ultimately, the Empire would find itself at a war on all fronts, with rebel armies being led by Jedi survivors, and the Separatists destroying anything of value in the Outer Rim. the Empire would not be able to build up its military quick enough to sustain itself. I highly doubt that the Empire would last a decade under these conditions. However, the fighting that would ensue would likely be far more devastating than that of the Galactic Civil War. But what do you think? What do you believe the Separatists would have done if they'd fled Sidious's wrath? And do you think it's ultimately better that they were killed on Mustafar, and why? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, because I found it to be another really interesting subject where it kind of shows how tiny little things can change the larger outcome. Please be sure to put your opinions below, and please like, comment and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.